The wedding dress felt heavy on my shoulders. That morning, I stood in front of the mirror and tried to recognize the girl looking back at me. She looked calm. She looked beautiful. But behind the makeup and jewelry, a quiet storm was growing inside her. I was only 20 years old, and I was about to marry a man I barely knew. Everyone said it was a good match. They said his family was rich and respected. They said he would take care of me. I smiled politely and thanked them. But deep inside, I felt small and powerless. In my family, daughters did not choose their own lives. From childhood, I was taught that obedience was love. A good daughter listens, a good daughter agrees. So when my father told me about the proposal, I nodded. I told myself that this was normal, that happiness would come later, that love could grow after marriage, just like people always said. The wedding was beautiful. Flowers covered the hall. Music filled the air. Guests laughed and clapped. I smiled for photos. I held my husband's hand. I played my role well. Everyone thought I was the luckiest woman in the world. But inside, I felt like a stranger watching someone else's life. That night, when the lights went out, I stared at the ceiling and wondered what I had done. The first months were quiet. My husband was polite but distant. He worked late and spent most evenings on his phone or laptop. When he spoke, it was only about money, business, or travel. I tried to please him. I smiled. I stayed silent. But his eyes never stayed on me for long. Sometimes he forgot my birthday. Sometimes he forgot what food I liked. I told myself he was busy. I told myself men showed love differently. But each night, I felt more invisible. One evening, while organizing the wardrobe, I found a small envelope in his drawer. Inside was a document. At first, I didn't understand it. Then I read it again. It was our marriage agreement, a contract. There was a line that said the marriage would last for a minimum of 1 year, renewable by consent. My hands began to shake. My marriage was not built on love. It was a deal. That night, when he came home, I wanted to scream. I wanted answers. But no sound came out. I went to sleep pretending everything was fine. The next morning, I smiled at him across the table. That was the moment I decided to survive quietly until I understood what to do. Days turned into weeks. I started painting again. Art had always been my escape. Colours spoke to me when people couldn't. When I painted, I felt free. My husband never noticed my paintings. When he did look at them, his eyes were confused, as if they were useless. Still, I didn't stop. Painting was my way of breathing. One evening, he told me he was going abroad for business. He didn't ask me to come. "It's better if you stay," he said. I nodded. The next morning, he left. For the first time, I felt something unexpected, relief. The house was quiet, but it was my silence now. I painted for hours. I cooked my favorite food. I listened to soft music. For the first time since my wedding, I didn't have to pretend. But peace never lasts forever. 3 months later, he returned. He was colder than before, angry, impatient. He shouted when I asked questions. One night, after an argument, he looked at me and said, "Don't forget, this is only a contract." Those words cut deeper than any knife. I didn't reply. I sat by the window until morning, watching the sky change colour. Something inside me broke quietly that night. A week later, my father visited. He asked if I was happy. I wanted to tell him the truth, but I couldn't. So I smiled and said yes. After he left, I cried until my chest hurt. I was trapped between duty and pain. Then, one rainy night, everything changed. We were returning from a wedding. The road was wet. The sky was dark. My husband was driving fast and talking on the phone. I asked him to slow down. He waved his hand. Moments later, the car slid and crashed into a barrier. Glass shattered, metal twisted. The world turned upside down. When I opened my eyes, everything hurt. I smelled smoke. My husband crawled out and ran for help. I couldn't move. The pain in my back was unbearable. Then everything went dark. I woke up in a hospital bed. My body was covered in bandages. My arm was broken. My ribs burned with every breath. And I couldn't feel my legs. The doctors told me my spine was badly injured. I might never walk again. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt empty. That night, staring at the ceiling, I whispered, "So this is my new life." One day, a nurse gave me a notebook. "You can draw," she said gently. My hand shook as I began. The lines were weak, but they were mine. For the first time in months, something inside me came alive. I painted every day. Other patients came to see my work. They said my colours were full of hope. They didn't see my tears. My husband visited less and less. Eventually, I stopped waiting for him. Before leaving the hospital, I asked for a wheelchair. At first, it felt like a cage. Then I realized it was also freedom. I rolled to the window and felt sunlight on my face. "This is my new beginning," I whispered. Life after divorce was not easy, but it was honest. I moved to a small apartment. I filled it with plants, colors, and light. I painted my pain. I painted my healing. People started noticing my work. Then one day, I adopted a baby boy. When I held him for the first time, my heart healed in a way no medicine ever could. Motherhood changed everything. Love taught me strength. Years have passed. I am still in a wheelchair, but I am free. I paint, I teach. I raise my son with kindness. I no longer live by contracts or fear. Freedom is not in the legs, it is in the mind. The world may see a woman in a wheelchair, but I see a survivor, a mother, an artist, and that is enough.